No one ever expected that a single elderly woman could silence a stadium filled with nearly 90,000 people during one of Michael Jackson's most legendary performances. But that night, as the world watched and cameras captured every second, she did something that could have destroyed Michael's spirit in front of everyone. Under blinding stage lights, with dancers frozen in confusion and fans screaming his name, Michael suddenly faced a moment of pure humiliation, a moment that would have shattered any ordinary performer. But Michael Jackson was never ordinary. Instead of reacting with anger, instead of defending himself in front of the crowd, Michael made a choice that exposed his heart more than any song ever could, a choice that turned an uncomfortable silence into a wave of emotion that brought thousands to tears. And what he whispered to the woman in that exact moment became one of the most powerful lessons the world has ever seen from the king of pop. This is the story of the night an elderly woman humiliated Michael Jackson on stage, and how his answer changed the entire atmosphere in seconds. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on all notifications so you never miss our emotional and revealing stories about Michael Jackson. Your support helps us continue honoring his legacy in the most powerful way. Michael Jackson had performed in stadiums all over the world: Tokyo, Paris, New York, and London. He had seen royalty, presidents, legends, and millions of fans who would scream his name with a single movement of his hand. But on that warm summer night in 1997, inside a packed stadium in Copenhagen, something happened on stage that he would never forget. Not because it was magical, but because it hurt. The show was sold out. 90,000 fans. A sea of glowing lights. The opening notes of Heal the World floated into the air, and the crowd swayed like one beating heart. Michael stepped into the spotlight wearing his signature gold suit, his curls damp from the heat, his eyes glowing with excitement and vulnerability. This was the part of the show he loved most. The moment he connected directly with the audience. The moment he looked into real faces, real emotions, real people. The moment he could feel love without speaking a single word. But that night, one face looked back at him differently. In the very front row, resting her chin on her hands, was an elderly woman with short gray hair and deep lines around her mouth. Everyone around her was cheering, crying, reaching out toward him, but not her. She looked unimpressed, disappointed, almost angry. Michael tried to ignore it. He turned his attention to the dozens of others nearby who were reaching desperately to touch his glove. He smiled, placed a hand on his heart, and blew a kiss. The stadium erupted, except for her. Her eyes followed him like she was judging everything he did. As he continued to sing, something in his chest tightened. It was a sensation he knew too well, a trigger from childhood, when he was told he was never enough, when he danced until his feet bled, but his father still shook his head, when perfection was expected and applause was earned through pain. So why, after all these years, did one disapproving stranger still have the power to make him feel like a failure? He tried again to win her over. As he passed her side of the stage, he knelt down, extending his microphone so the children in the audience could sing with him. The crowd screamed so loudly that the speakers crackled, but she didn't move. She crossed her arms tightly, leaned back, and shook her head with a look of disapproval, so sharp it pierced him. Suddenly, the lights felt too hot. His breathing quickened. His voice cracked slightly on a note. No one noticed, except her. He stood quickly and moved to the center of the stage, trying to refocus. "Come on," he whispered to himself. "Give them everything." But his chest felt heavy. His choreographer, watching from the wings, noticed something was wrong. Michael's movements were still flawless, but there was a hesitation, like a piece of his spirit had been left behind near that woman's seat. Why was she there? Why did she look like she hated him? Halfway through the song, Michael's eyes drifted back toward her. He wished he hadn't, because now she was laughing, not with joy, not with excitement, but mocking him, like he was ridiculous, like he was wasting her time, like he was just some grown man in sequins pretending to matter. A cold sting ran through his veins. His childhood voice echoed in his head. "They're laughing at you again." He blinked hard, forcing himself to keep singing. The lyrics suddenly tasted bittersweet. Heal the world. Make it a better place. He had written those words to bring comfort to others, to show the world he cared, even when no one cared for him. And yet, here was someone right in front of him, unable or unwilling to feel any of it. But what he didn't know yet, what made this moment even more painful, was that she wasn't done. As he moved closer again, she raised her hands, not to clap, not to wave, but to make a gesture, a simple flick of the hand, like she was swatting away a fly, as if he were beneath her. Michael's heart nearly stopped. Before he could react, a young girl beside the woman burst into tears. Still trying to reach for Michael as security held her back. The contrast between them, the little girl sobbing with love, the old woman glaring with scorn, was almost too much to process. Michael stepped back, placing a hand over his chest. The music continued, but inside, everything felt silent. For the first time that night, he didn't want to be on stage. He didn't want to smile. He wanted to disappear. His eyes lowered to the floor, the spotlight turning into a cage instead of celebration. The stadium, once filled with joy, now felt like a battlefield. The cheers became distant. His hands trembled. One thought hit him like a punch to the stomach. Maybe I really am a joke to some people. And that terrified him. As the final chorus played, he forced himself to lift his head. The world expected perfection, and perfection never faltered. He pushed his pain deep inside and finished the song with every ounce of strength he had left. The crowd roared, except for her. She simply stared, cold, disappointed, unimpressed. Michael bowed professionally, but inside, something had shattered. And in the next song, when he walked toward her again, she would say something that almost stopped the entire show. Michael stood frozen beneath the blinding arena lights, every heartbeat echoing louder than the screams of nearly 90,000 fans who filled Wembley Stadium that night in 1988. The moment that elderly woman had pushed his hand away replayed in slow motion inside his mind, her disapproving glare, her dismissive shake of the head, and her words that cut deeper than she could ever imagine. "Don't touch me." From the outside, it lasted 2 seconds. Inside, it felt like a collapse. Michael had spent his entire life learning how to give love to audiences who took pieces of his soul in return. But rejection, harsh rejection, from someone who resembled the warmth and safety of grandmother, that hit differently. It awakened an old fear. Maybe I will never be enough. Maybe the more I give, the more they will turn away. But the music didn't stop. And a megastar doesn't break. Michael inhaled sharply, forcing his shoulders to rise even as dread pressed him down. He stepped back to his mark, lifted the microphone, and continued to sing the chorus of Human Nature. His voice trembled at first, then strengthened as thousands of fans sang with him, helping him hold the moment together piece by fragile piece. Behind him, one of the dancers glanced over, worried. He saw the slight crack in Michael's composure, something the world rarely witnessed. But Michael sent a small nod back, silently saying, "I'm okay. Keep going. The show must go on." He danced. He spun. He smiled for the cameras. He commanded the stage like only Michael Jackson could. But inside, something unsettled took root. During a transition between songs, Michael retreated toward the shadows near the stage curtain, where Frank Dillio, his manager, handed him a towel and bottle of water. "You good, Mike?" Frank asked, observing his pale expression. Michael forced a tiny smile. "Everything's fine. Just hot out there." Frank didn't believe him, but he didn't push. This was the biggest night of the Bad Tour. Michael was performing for royalty, for international press, for millions watching live broadcasts. Pressure wasn't allowed to show. Then he felt again, eyes on him. He turned and saw her. The same elderly woman, front row, still seated, looking up at him with the same stern expression. She wasn't cheering. She wasn't singing. She was just staring, judging. Michael's chest tightened. He almost looked away, almost retreated into the mask he'd worn for years. But something inside him changed. Instead of fear, he felt curiosity. Instead of embarrassment, he felt determination. He whispered to himself, "See her. Really see her." Michael returned to the center of the stage for Man in the Mirror. As the opening chords began, The arena erupted in screams. Michael closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him like a tide. When he opened them again, he looked straight at her. He didn't see a hater. He didn't see someone cruel. He saw someone alone. Her arms were crossed, not in anger but protection. Her shoulders leaned forward as if guarding her heart. She wasn't here for him. She wasn't here for the spectacle. She was here because someone dragged her out of her comfort zone and dropped her into a world of deafening sound and flashing lights. She looked lost, and Michael was intimately familiar with feeling lost in a crowd. So he changed the moment with deliberate softness. He walked slowly toward the edge of the stage, right in front of her. His dancers cleared a path without even thinking. Spotlights followed him like obedient servants. Michael kneeled down, not as a superstar, not as a legend, as a human. The entire stadium gasped. The woman blinked in shock. Her stern look trembled, like a mask slipping. Michael smiled gently and pointed at himself, then at her, silently asking, "May I?" This time, she didn't pull away. She nodded, barely noticeable, but unmistakably a yes. Michael took her hand again, but this time with the tenderness of a grandson greeting a long-lost grandmother. The crowd erupted into emotional cheers, a wave of joy rushing through the stadium. Michael held her hand to his chest, right over his heart, and sang softly into the mic, "If you want to make the world a better place." Her lips parted. Tears filled her eyes. Michael felt it instantly. Recognition, connection, healing. The moment turned sacred. The elderly woman covered her mouth as if holding back decades of feeling, grief, loss, maybe even regret. Michael didn't know her pain, but he understood its language. He squeezed her hand gently. Something inside him unlocked. Something heavy released. The lights grew brighter. The choir joined in. The fans lifted their phones and lighters into the sky, like stars blooming in darkness. In that moment, nobody judged him. Nobody mocked him. Nobody misunderstood him. And then, just when Michael thought the moment couldn't become more emotional, the woman stood up, slowly, carefully. The stadium fell into stunned silence. She used both hands to turn Michael's palm upward, and she kissed it. Michael's heart nearly gave out. The world watched as she looked up at him with new eyes, not of a stranger, not of a critic, but of someone who finally saw the real Michael, a man who just wanted to love and be loved back. Michael stepped back, utterly overwhelmed. He placed his hand over his heart again and tried not to cry in front of 90,000 people. But something else was coming, something he didn't expect. The woman leaned closer, whispering something only he could hear. Michael's eyes widened. And then the band cut. Lights shifted. A stage manager motioned urgently from the wings. Something backstage was wrong. And suddenly Michael realized this night was far from over. The roar of 90,000 people could be felt in Michael Jackson's bones. Their cheers vibrated through the floor beneath his feet, rising like a wave that wanted to carry him higher than he already was. He stood at the edge of the stage, drenched in sweat, lungs burning from the intensity of "Beat It." The spotlight illuminating him like a star ripped from the sky. He should have been exhilarated, but the words from the old woman backstage were still echoing in his mind. "You call this music? You're no real man. You're a grown boy wearing sequins." He had heard thousands of insults throughout his life. The media, tabloids, false accusations. He learned to ignore them. But something about her voice, old, sharp, dismissive, ignited a pain he hadn't expected, because it sounded familiar. It sounded like every judgment thrown at him since childhood, every voice that tried to shrink him. His chest tightened as he transitioned offstage for the next costume change. His dancers rushed past, exhilarated. Stage managers waved arms, whispered cues. He moved through all the chaos silently, a storm inside a storm. His longtime wardrobe assistant, Marco, noticed something different in his eyes. "You good, Mike?" Michael blinked. Yeah, just a bit winded." "You sure? You look like someone just punched you in the heart." Michael forced a smile. "Nothing like that." But Marco wasn't convinced. Meanwhile, the show rolled forward like a train with no brakes. The screen above the stadium lit up an electrifying visual introduction for a man in the mirror. The crowd screamed even louder, an ocean of hands reaching for him. He was expected back on stage in less than 30 seconds. Marco fastened the iconic crystal jacket around his shoulders. The lights reflected off every jewel-like star in the fabric. Michael stared down at it and hesitated. He whispered, almost himself, "Why do people hate what they don't understand?" Marco paused. What happened backstage? Michael lifted his head slowly. Someone called me a disgrace. Said my music is worthless. Marco scoffed, half confused, half furious. Tonight? Here? Who would be that stupid? Michael swallowed. Someone who thinks they're better because they've lived longer. The cue in his earpiece crackled. Michael, stand by. Spotlight in 15 seconds. Marco leaned closer, hands gripping Michael's upper arms. Listen to me. 90,000 people came here to feel something impossible, something only you can give. Don't you ever let anyone convince you that's worthless. Michael's lips trembled. His eyes shimmered, not with tears but with rising strength. Thank you, he whispered. He took a deep breath, turning toward the stage entrance when a voice cut through the noise. Are you done pretending now? It was her. The elderly woman had somehow followed them to the side of the stage. A security guard approached her, reaching to block her path, but she waved her cane wildly. All this glitter won't save your soul, she barked. Michael Jackson, you're a fraud. Michael froze. The countdown in his ears stopped mattering. The roar of the crowd faded. Her words pierced him again, this time deeper. For a moment, he looked at her, not with anger or fear, but with a heartbreaking softness. She didn't know him. She didn't see the human being inside the fame, the pain, the child who never got to run freely or make mistakes. He took one step toward her. Marco grabbed his arm. Michael, no, the song is starting. Michael gently lifted Marco's hand away. As the music intro played and the spotlight searched for him, he walked toward the old woman, steady, calm, unshakable, and stopped right in front of her. What's your name, ma'am? He asked, voice soft but firm. Her eyes widened, caught off guard. What does my name have to do with anything? It matters, Michael replied, because if someone is going to judge me so harshly, I think I should at least know the name of the person I'm disappointing. The crowd chanted his name outside. Michael? Michael. But here, in this small corner of the stadium, time stood still. Her voice cracked slightly. My name is Dolores. Michael nodded gently. Nice to meet you, Miss Dolores. She stared at him, confused, trembling slightly. Why are you talking to me like I'm someone special? Because you are, he answered instantly. Everyone here is. That's why I sing. That's why I perform. Not to show off, but to help people feel loved. Seen. Alive. Dolores blinked, and her hostility wavered. Maybe, she muttered. I was too harsh. Michael gave a tiny smile, full of grace. It's okay. We all get scared sometimes. And sometimes fear makes us hurt each other. A stage manager rushed toward him. Michael, we need you now. Michael squeezed Dolores' hand gently. Watch the next song, please. He turned toward the blinding light of the stage entrance. The stadium roared as he stepped into the spotlight. He didn't just walk, he floated, like the applause carried him. The opening chords of Man in the Mirror boomed through the entire arena. Thousands of fans screamed. But Dolores, she stood still. She watched. Michael placed a hand over his heart and began to sing. His voice trembled with emotion, deeper and more powerful than ever. Every lyric hit the air like a promise, a reminder, a transformation. Michael Jackson was not a fraud. He was hope. He was healing. He was love dressed in rhinestones and humanity. And 90,000 people felt it at the exact same moment. As the choir joined in, as the lights exploded across the night sky, Dolores covered her mouth and began to cry. Backstage at Wembley was chaos. Stagehand shouting cues, dancers rushing to change, and security guiding VIPs to the maze of hallways. But Michael didn't hear any of it. The roar of the crowd was still echoing inside his chest, but his heart was somewhere else entirely, out there in the stands, where the elderly woman sat. Michael couldn't shake the look she gave him. Not anger, not mockery, but disappointment. Deep, wounded disappointment that hurt worse than any insult could. He stood frozen in the dim backstage corridor, breathing heavily, his gloved hand pressed to his forehead. Kenny Ortega jogged up beside him, arm around his shoulder. "Mike, that was a strange moment, but you handled it beautifully. The crowd loved you." Michael stared forward, not really listening. "But she didn't." Kenny frowned. "Who?" "The lady," Michael whispered. "You saw her. She looked like I ruined her night." Kenny softened his tone. "Michael, listen to me. You didn't ruin anything. People shout things all the time during shows." "She wasn't shouting," Michael corrected quietly. "She was crying." Kenny paused, realizing this wasn't going away easily. "Look, you have a 20-minute break. Focus on the next set, okay? We'll check on her after." Michael nodded, but nothing in him believed that was enough. While he sipped warm water, Michael looked out toward the edge of the backstage curtain. He could see part of the audience from there, just a sliver, but to him, it looked like miles of faces, and he kept searching for hers. "Why did she say I embarrass her?" he whispered under his breath. "I would never want to embarrass anyone." He closed his eyes and exhaled. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat. A security guard approached. "Mr. Jackson, there's a man here saying it's an emergency. He's asking to speak with you. Says it's urgent." Michael stiffened. The last thing he needed was another distraction. "Who is he? A reporter? Paparazzi?" "No, sir. He says he's the son of that elderly woman." Michael's water cup slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a splash. "Bring him to my dressing tent," Michael said immediately. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man with gray streaks in his hair entered. He looked flustered, worried, and deeply protective. Michael stood. "Is your mother okay? Please tell me she's all right." The man sighed. "She's shaken. She didn't expect so much attention on her." Michael's voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. Truly, I only meant to make her feel special." "She knows," the man replied gently. "But my mother isn't used to big crowds anymore. She gets anxious. She said when you pointed at her, she felt like all eyes were on her, and it overwhelmed her." Michael's eyes glossed with pain. "I forget sometimes how much power a single gesture has." The man hesitated, then softened. "She doesn't hate you, Mr. Jackson. Not at all. She actually adores you. You're the reason she's here. She just didn't know how to handle the moment." Michael placed a hand over his heart. "May I see her? Just for a second. I want to apologize personally." The man nodded. "Give me 5 minutes to get her a little calmer. She'll want to see you." When he exited, Michael sat alone in the dressing tent, hands clasped, head bowed. He whispered a prayer, not for the show, not for himself, but for her. Please let her know my heart was in the right place. Kenny poked his head in. "Mike, we need to get you dressed for the next section." "I'm meeting her first," Michael replied quietly. Kenny blinked. "Michael, there's 90,000 people waiting." Michael slowly raised his eyes, and the emotion inside them silenced any argument. "I know," he said. "That's exactly why this matters." Outside, the lights dimmed again and tens of thousands of fans screamed in anticipation for the next hit. The stadium shimmered, expecting their king to return. Michael stepped out of the tent, only to find the elderly woman's son rushing back toward him alone. Michael froze. "Where is she?" he asked, fear spiking instantly. The man's face was pale. She left her seat. "She's trying to leave the stadium." "What? Why?" Michael's chest tightened. "She said she caused you embarrassment." The man said, breathless. "She said she didn't belong here." Michael didn't even think. He ran, back through the backstage corridor, past confused dancers, through the curtain, down a stairwell leading to the audience platform. Security guards scrambled to keep up as Michael's shoes pounded the concrete. Fans gasped as they saw him, out of costume, just himself, sprinting through the arena. "Michael? What's happening?" someone yelled. But he didn't stop. He spotted her, small, fragile, lost in the crowd of towering strangers, walking slowly toward an exit tunnel with her eyes lowered, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Ma'am!" Michael called out. She didn't turn. "Ma'am, please." "Wait." She kept walking. Michael reached out and touched her hand. She froze. Slowly, fearfully, she turned around. Her eyes widened when she saw him, the real him, breathless, worried, desperate to make this right. Michael swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Please don't leave. I never wanted to hurt you." Her lips trembled. "I didn't mean to upset you. I'm too old for this attention." Michael's eyes filled. He shook his head softly. "You deserve attention. You deserve love. You deserve joy. You deserve this night." The crowd around them went silent. Some recording, some crying, some just stunned. Michael squeezed her hand gently. "You are important," he whispered, "and I would be honored if you come back with me." The old woman's chin quivered as tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. "But, Michael," she whispered, voice trembling, "I don't belong on a stage." Michael smiled, the kind of smile that healed people. "Yes," he said softly, "you belong exactly there." The crowd at Wembley had seen unforgettable performances before, but nothing like what was happening tonight. Michael stood center stage, still catching his breath from the last song. His heart was pounding, not from exhaustion, but from the emotional weight of what had just occurred. That moment with the elderly woman had shaken him in a way he did not expect. Her words pierced through years of pressure, expectations, and constant judgment. She had humiliated him without hesitation. Yet somehow his kindness had turned the entire night around. But as Michael reached for his microphone again, preparing to continue the show, he noticed something unusual happening near the front row. Fans weren't screaming anymore, not in the usual excited way. Instead, they were staring at the elderly woman, whispering, wiping tears from their eyes. Michael felt a strange pull inside his chest. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage. The spotlight followed him automatically, bathing the front row in a warm golden glow. The elderly woman stood stiffly, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Her face was flushed with embarrassment, but also something else. Shame, regret, or maybe fear. Fear being seen differently now. Michael crouched down carefully, making sure the guards didn't interfere. He extended his hand, this time slower, gentler. "What's your name?" he asked, voice soft enough that only those near the stage could hear. She hesitated, swallowing hard. "My name is Margaret," she replied, eyes shining with tears she clearly didn't want to show. Michael nodded, repeating it like it mattered. "Margaret." She looked away as if she expected him to ridicule her now, to give back the humiliation she threw at him minutes ago. But that wasn't who he was. Michael lifted the microphone again and smiled faintly. "Margaret, would you do me the honor of helping me with something?" He stood, still reaching his hand toward her. The entire stadium froze. The security guards glanced at each other, confused. They weren't trained for this kind of moment. Margaret stared up at him, stunned, speechless. She shook her head at first, a reflex born of fear. "No, I shouldn't." "Yes," Michael replied gently. "You should." It was permission. It was forgiveness. It was grace in its purest form. Slowly, with visible effort, Margaret reached up and placed her hand into his. The crowd erupted instantly, not in mockery but in celebration. Tens of thousands of people stood and cheered as Michael helped her climb onto the stage. For a brief second, she wobbled, and he held her steady. "You're safe?" he whispered. Her lip quivered. She nodded. Michael guided her to the center of the stage, where he handed her one of his gloves, the white one, covered in bright crystals that reflected every beam of light in the stadium. The glove, the icon, the symbol of the king of pop. Margaret froze, staring at it like it was too holy to touch. "For you," Michael said simply. Her fingers trembled as she accepted it, holding it to her chest like fragile treasure. The stadium roared again with emotional applause. Michael took a few steps back and lifted the microphone. "Everyone," he said with a proud, joyful smile, "this is Margaret. She came here tonight to enjoy the show with us. Let's make sure she feels welcome." 90,000 voices answered with cheers so loud they shook the walls. Margaret burst into tears, not softly, but the kind of cry that comes from years of holding pain inside. Michael approached and wiped her cheek with his thumb. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're loved here." He kissed her hand. She nearly collapsed from the tenderness of that gesture. But Michael wasn't done yet. A stage assistant rushed toward them, carrying a gorgeous bouquet of red roses. Fresh, brilliant, full of life. Michael took them and placed them carefully into Margaret's arms. "Thank you for being here tonight," he said, bowing to her like she was royalty. The audience screamed louder than during any song so far. Margaret stood there, shaking, overwhelmed, a woman transformed. Minutes ago, she had insulted him, attempted to diminish him, tried to convince the world that he was less than human. And what did he do? He showed her that love is stronger than judgment. He chose compassion instead of pride, grace instead of anger, dignity instead of destruction. Margaret lowered her head, tears falling onto the roses. "I'm so sorry," she whispered so quietly he almost didn't hear it. Michael's smile didn't fade. "I know," he said. "That's why you're here." The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the next song. Michael stepped back, giving her one last supportive look before turning to the band. But as the intro music began, something changed. The crowd wasn't looking at him anymore. They were looking behind him. Michael spun around slowly. Margaret wasn't alone anymore. A man had stepped onto the stage. Older, serious, wearing a VIP badge. And he was walking straight toward Michael. Michael blinked, confused. "Sir, this area is..." The man cut him off with a low voice only the two of them could hear. "She shouldn't be here, Michael." Margaret gasped. "Walter, please." Michael tensed, sensing something dark shifting beneath the surface of this tender moment. Who was he? Why had he come straight onto the stage? And why did his expression look like he wasn't amazed, but angry? Walter took Margaret's arm firmly and whispered a sentence that made Michael's stomach drop. "You don't get to forgive her until she forgives herself." Michael stepped forward instinctively, but stopped when he saw the terror in Margaret's eyes. It wasn't the stage that frightened her now. It was him. The stadium slowly fell into confused silence, right as the nightmare beneath this miracle began to reveal itself. The world seemed to freeze around Michael as the arena held its breath. 90,000 fans in Wembley Stadium waited to see how the greatest entertainer alive would respond to such humiliation. The elderly woman stood just a few feet away from him, staring with disapproval and judgment etched across her features. Her voice still echoed in his head. "You are strange. People shouldn't admire a man like you." Those words had stabbed deeper than she could ever imagine. They weren't new insults. Michael had heard versions of them his entire life. But there was something different about them spoken here. Spoken now. In front of everyone he poured his soul out for. He stood silently, microphone still in hand. The audience, unsure whether to boo or defend him, looked at him with anticipation. How would Michael Jackson react? A single camera zoomed in on his face, revealing the heartbreak he tried so hard to hide. His lower lip trembled slightly. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. For a moment, the mask slipped, and the world saw Michael, the man, not the legend. He took a step forward. Security moved closer, prepared to remove the woman, but Michael gently raised a hand, stopping them. "No, please," he said softly. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was calm, gentle, almost heartbreakingly kind. He approached the woman slowly until he stood just inches in front of her. She looked up at him. Shocked, he dared to come closer instead of pushing her away. Michael leaned down, so his voice would only carry to her and the microphone. "What's your name?" he asked tenderly. She looked confused. "Margaret." Michael nodded, offering a small smile. "That's a beautiful name." The entire stadium was silent. You could hear the wind move through the open venue. Michael continued, "I know sometimes I seem different, and sometimes people misunderstand me. They think my heart is something it's not. But Margaret, all I've ever wanted is to make people happy, to bring love into their lives. to remind them that childhood matters, that imagination matters, that kindness still matters. Margaret's stern expression began to waver. Michael's eyes, soft and sincere, were impossible to ignore. "I didn't choose this life," he whispered. "I didn't choose the spotlight. I didn't choose the rumors. I didn't choose to grow up without a childhood. But I choose one thing every single day." He pressed a hand gently to his heart. "To love, even those who can't love me back." A tear rolled down Margaret's cheek before she realized it was happening. The stadium camera caught the moment, and the audience gasped. Michael offered his hand to her. "Would you dance with me, Margaret?" The crowd broke into stunned murmurs, some crying already. Margaret froze. She didn't deserve this. She had insulted him, ridiculed him, and yet he was offering her something unforgettable. Michael smiled reassuringly. "It's okay," he said softly. "Let me show you what love looks like." Her trembling hand reached out, and Michael Jackson gently helped her step toward the center of the stage. The lights dimmed. The band began to play the opening soft notes of "Heal the World." The crowd erupted into roaring applause, a wave of emotion flooding the stadium. Michael placed one hand lightly on her shoulder and guided her in a slow, graceful sway. It wasn't a choreographed dance. It was simple, human, filled with forgiveness. Everyone in the arena watched the king of pop, the most famous man alive, show compassion for someone who had shown him none. Tears streamed down faces in every direction. Michael leaned close and whispered to Margaret, "The world is already full of pain. We can choose to be part of the healing." She sobbed openly now, regret and gratitude colliding inside her. Michael held her steady, never letting her feel ashamed. When the music ended, Michael raised her joined hands into the air and looked out at the audience. "This," he said, voice cracking with emotion, "is what love does." A thunderous eruption of applause shook Wembley Stadium, louder than any cheer he had ever received. People screamed his name, not because of his dance moves or his voice, but because of his heart. Margaret wiped her tears and whispered, "I'm sorry, Michael." He smiled, kissed the back of her hand, and replied, "There's nothing to forgive." The lights dimmed again. Michael bowed his head, letting relief wash through him. He had turned humiliation into a moment the world would never forget, a moment of grace, compassion, strength, and love. He stepped near the mic once more. "If you believe the world can be better," he said, voice strong as the stadium lights brightened again, "then help me make it better. Help me turn hurt into hope." The audience cheered so loudly that London could probably hear for miles. Michael placed a hand over his heart, thankful, emotional, and human, and whispered to himself, "This is why I keep going." That night, 90,000 people didn't just witness a concert. They witnessed Michael Jackson's greatest performance, responding to cruelty with love, responding to humiliation with kindness, responding to judgment with grace. And for the first time, even Margaret realized what the rest of the world was finally seeing. Michael Jackson was not just a star. He was a light that refused to go out, a light that taught millions that love is always the strongest answer. The stage faded to black, but the lesson never did.